Good morning, Commissioners. Chief Moore, Mr. T. Fank, Madam Secretary, Mr. Inspector General Mark Smith, Mr. City Attorney Carlos De La Guerra, and members of the public. Today is Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. It's 9:30 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning, Commissioner Briggs,
Present.
Commissioner Decker,
Present.
Commissioner Bonner. He's present. Commissioner Kalanche absent, and Commissioner Sobroff.
Here.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Also present, we have the Executive Director, the Chief of Police, the Inspector General, and the City Attorney. Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We welcome everyone attending this morning. All public comment will be heard during item 2 on the agenda. We will dedicate a total of 45 minutes to public comment. Members of the public who will have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. At the request of the speaker will be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes total. Members of the public who participate in public comment are reminded that they can speak to any item on the agenda or a matter within the jurisdiction of the Board of Police Commissioners. Public comment is your opportunity to address the board. So you are free to express your opinion on matters before the board and to generally express when you disagree with other opinions expressed. However, directing your comments to other individuals who have spoken or attacking others who have expressed their opinions shall be deemed off topic and your public comment period will be concluded. Members of the public, if you choose to participate in public comment portion of the agenda, you can participate in this meeting in one of a number of ways. They are outlined on the agenda. At this time, we'll go to item 1 on the agenda, the report of the Chief of Police. Good morning, Chief Moore.
Good morning, Commissioner President Briggs, members of the Commission, Mr. City Attorney, Mr. Inspector General, Mr. T. Fank, Board Secretary. As I do each week, I'll begin my remarks on a COVID-19 update. My summary today involves the activity that's occurred over the last 3 weeks. Just as a reminder, in the absence of commission meetings the last 2 weeks. So with that, as of today, we have 6,998 of our personnel that have tested positive for COVID. That is an increase of 186 from over a 3-week period. Interesting aspect of this is that the increase has been evenly split between our civilian and sworn personnel. This is a consequence of us seeing in our jail settings and our communications division, both of those commands are largely staffed by our professional civilian work class, seeing the increases in the positive testing for COVID. I am grateful that the recovery of our personnel continues with only 1 individual hospitalized. This has been a long-term hospitalization. I was very grateful today to learn that he is expected to be discharged next Tuesday after a long haul bout with COVID. Our at-home work status today is 202 of our personnel. That's an increase of 82 from the last time I reported, which was at that time it was 120. 17 of those cases are what we consider long-haul COVID recoveries. The average absence from the workplace is 9 days. And so we continue to see a quick recovery of our personnel. We now have 5,379 that have returned to duty. That's an increase of 91 from the same, from my last reporting to this group. As to significant events, in the interest of time, I'm just going to cover a couple of events. First, I want to lead with the terrible and horrific shooting that occurred last night that I responded to, as well as directed a number of our department resources from our robbery homicide division, as well as our scientific investigation division and others, to the North Hollywood area of the San Fernando Valley, where just before 8 o'clock last night, a lone CHP uniform officer conducting traffic enforcement attempted a vehicle stop. The vehicle of a lone individual male came to the 4500 block of Laurel Canyon Boulevard. During a engagement with the officer talking with the suspect in the vehicle, I observed a video that shows the individual exiting his vehicle and a confrontation occurring with the lone officer. We believe at this point that the individual, the motorist, took a handgun from his waistband and shot our lone CHP officer multiple times before re-entering his vehicle and fleeing from the location. North Hollywood units, as well as others, responded immediately to support and assist the CHP in their investigation. That investigation led them to a apartment residence that's been widely broadcasted over the ensuing hours, where we believe the suspect was potentially staying inside his residence. A long ordeal involving our SWAT resources ultimately determined that he was not at that location. We did have multiple contacts with his family members. His family members have been cooperative with us in an effort to have this individual surrender. The overnight tactical actions also involved not just the support of the California Highway Patrol, but the marshaling of resources, including the U.S. Marshal Service. Those investigative efforts continued overnight into this morning, where with the use of a department bloodhound, trailing effort was made and ultimately went outside of the established perimeter into a nearby neighborhood, residential neighborhood, where there was an encampment of homeless individuals. Inside that encampment, in one of those tents, our person we believe responsible for the shooting and attempt murder of the CHP officer was located. He was taken into custody without further incident. We do believe that he suffered a gunshot wound to his hand during this altercation with the officer. The investigation is very much in the preliminary stages. As indicated, the department has responded initially. I had conversations with the chief from Southern Division, offering all of our resources to assist them in this, and also visited the hospital and met with the officer's family. I'm encouraged that the officer's condition has improved overnight and is currently stable after suffering multiple gunshot wounds. And it is hoped that he will recover from this grievous assault. Next area I want to speak about is something more positive, and that is the Summit of the Americas, which completed the run on this past Saturday. This was a world event, the summit that has not been held in the United States since 1994, and took the collective efforts of a unified command of our federal law enforcement partners, state as well as local. The whole of city, including the activation of the Emergency Operations Center, the Department of Operations Center, Department of Transportation, Fire Department. This was an all-hands event for the planning to ensure a successful and safe and secure event. I am very proud of the work of our men and women that over the course of the days, very long days, full mobilization of this workforce, that we saw a successful event. We saw a number of demonstrations that were peaceful, that expressed their views in a manner that allowed their voices to be heard and their message to be received. There was very few instances of any type of criminal activity. There was one incursion with an assault on a federal officer. That woman, she was arrested and is facing federal charges. There was another individual that apparently that struck another U.S. Secret Service agent as the agent was attempting to stop the suspect from driving into a nearby hotel. The agent was protecting another head of state when this incident occurred. We don't think that that was a targeted event. We think that that event was entirely spontaneous and dealt with the impatience of the motorist that was also arrested. Fortunately, that Secret Service agent did not suffer any serious injury. Lastly, we had a few burglary or thefts from vehicles that occurred during this period. But overall, I want to stress that I think that the event was well orchestrated, organized. I want to thank Assistant Chief Labrada, Assistant Chief Marino, Deputy Chief Kowalski, Commander Shannon Paulson, who did a significant lift in the planning and organizing of this event. And I'm happy to see that it has concluded safely, and that was one without any incident. Lastly, Sunday, I had the opportunity to participate with a number of other police department employees, both sworn and civilian, as well as with members of the fire department in the Los Angeles Pride Parade. There, and with more than 10,000 people in attendance, we walked the parade course and saw a very festive and celebratory crowd. It's been more than 2 years since we've been able to hold that event, and it was one that encouraged the heart, and certainly much of Los Angeles came out and enjoyed, I think, a very festive and an inclusive event celebrating Pride Month. Next areas I'd like to cover is the categorical uses of force that occurred during this 3-week period. I'm going to talk about 1, officer-involved shooting that did not involve a hit, 2, that did involve a hit, also an animal shooting that occurred last night, as well as an accidental discharge that occurred last night. And I'll go through these in a sequence as they occurred. The first one occurred on June 2nd at approximately 9 o'clock in the morning in the Olympic area. And there, the Olympic patrol officers received a radio call of an assault with a deadly weapon suspect armed with a handgun. That individual is later identified as Marvin Kua, a male Hispanic, 24 years of age. As the officers responded to the area at the radio call, they observed a person who matched the description of the suspect. They immediately exited their vehicle and detained him. The suspect then fled on foot on Berendo Street. The officers went in foot pursuit of Mr. Kua. During the short foot pursuit, Mr. Kua allegedly removed a handgun from his waistband, pointing in the direction of the officers, and an officer-involved shooting occurred. Mr. Kua was struck once and continued running southbound in the parking lot of a shopping center on the northeast corner of Berendo and 8th Street. Seconds later, he fell forward on the pavement where he was taken into custody. A rescue ambulance was requested and CPR was performed by the officers while they awaited for the RA unit to arrive. The RA unit did arrive and pronounced Mr. Kua deceased at scene. There were no officers that were injured as a result of this incident. A loaded .22 caliber semi-automatic handgun was recovered from the scene of this incident. The next incident occurred in the Topanga area and is a categorical use of force. It occurred on the 6th of June at approximately 3:45 in the evening when Topanga uniform officers received a radio call of a domestic violence suspect in the 7300 block of Independence Avenue. When the officers arrived at scene, they located the suspect, identified as Mr. Kevin Gonzalez, and a victim inside the residence. As the officers made contact with Mr. Gonzalez, he began to resist, resulting in a non-categorical use of force. Officers were successfully detaining Mr. Gonzalez and walked him back to their police vehicles. As the officer attempted to place Mr. Gonzalez into the rear portion of their vehicle, Mr. Gonzalez again began to resist, and a second use of force occurred. During the second use of force, it involved an officer who momentarily contacted the suspect's neck or throat area. And on the basis of that, this became a categorical use of force investigation. Mr. Gonzalez complained of an injury to his neck and was transported by LA Fire Rescue Ambulance to a nearby hospital where he was treated and cleared for booking by the medical staff. As I said, force investigations will investigate this, given the nature of the contact with Mr. Gonzalez's neck by the officer, and that report investigation will be brought before the commission. Next event occurred as an officer-involved shooting involving a hit in the Hollywood area on the 8th of June. There at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Hollywood officers responded to a radio call of 3 burglary suspects on the 2000 block of Paramount Drive. When the officers arrived, they detained 2 individuals while the 3rd suspect fled on foot. The perimeter was established and the description of the outstanding suspect was broadcasted. Approximately 1 hour later, officers on the perimeter observed an individual who matched the suspect's description walking south on Highland Avenue. That person was later identified as Anthony Upakaya. Officers broadcast their observations and attempted to detain the individual. The individual turned and ran southbound on Highland Avenue as the officers went in foot pursuit of him. During that foot pursuit, Mr. Upakaya allegedly pointed a handgun in the officer's direction, resulting in officer-involved shooting. The suspect was struck in the right arm and dropped the handgun and ran back onto Highland Avenue, attempting to force his way into multiple occupied vehicles. He continued running southbound towards Franklin Avenue, where he was tasered by officers and tackled by additional officers. He was taken into custody and transported to a local hospital for a gunshot wound to his arm. He was treated and absentee booked for a ADW on a police officer with a firearm. No officers were injured during this incident, and a loaded 9mm polymer 80 ghost gun was recovered from the scene. The next event was an officer-involved shooting that did not involve a hit, which was June 12th of this year at 2:45 in the morning. There, Newton uniform officers received a radio call of a robbery had just occurred at the 100 block of West Florence Avenue at a Winchell's Donut Shop. When officers arrived, they encountered an individual located on the northwest corner of the parking lot. The individual appeared to be armed with an edged weapon. Officers deployed from their vehicle and gave numerous commands for him to disarm and cooperate. As the suspect, later identified as Luis Ramirez, began to close the distance on the officers, officers discharged two 40mm less lethal launcher rounds, striking him in the lower torso with limited effect on him. As Mr. Ramirez continued to advance in the direction of one of the officers, an officer-involved shooting occurred. Mr. Ramirez ceased advancing and returned to the northwest corner of the parking lot, and after several minutes of verbal commands, surrendered to the officers. No officers were injured during this incident, and Mr. Ramirez was transported to a nearby hospital for a minor abrasion to his left hand, and he was released for booking. A metal pastry cutter was recovered from the scene. Two last issues to report on. One is involving an officer-involved shooting involving an animal, and this occurred outside the city limits in the city of Fontana. Yesterday at approximately 7:25 in the evening, an off-duty level 1 line reserve was informed that a vicious dog was on the loose in his neighborhood and attacking people as they walked their dogs. The officer drove into the neighborhood and observed a gray pit bull attack various people walking with their dogs and children. The pit bull then charged towards a couple walking two dogs and began violently mauling one of those animals. Knowing that there were numerous people in the area, the officer identified himself, directed a couple to step back, and using his department backup weapon, delivered a single shot to the pit bull. The pit bull immediately stopped, collapsed, and died at the scene. The couple's dog was transported to a veterinarian and succumbed to its injuries as sustained by the dog mauling. No one else was injured during this incident. Last issue is an accidental discharge where yesterday at approximately 11:20 at night, an off-duty officer assigned to the mission area was handling his department-approved privately purchased firearm, and this occurred in the West Valley area of the San Fernando Valley, and had a non-tactical unintentional discharge inside his residence. The round discharged into the frame of his bedroom window, and no one was injured during this incident, and Force Investigation Division responded to investigate that incident. With these reports, we now have had a total of 12 officer-involved shootings for the year, 4 involving no hits, and 8 involving a hit of an individual. Those 12 that have occurred this year are in relationship to 17 that occurred last year, and a 4-year average of just over 15. There have been 4 fatal officer-involved shootings this year. That number was 6 last year at this time, and the average 4 years is 6. And speaking and transitioning now to crime, this past week, we saw a substantial increase in the number of homicides, particularly influenced by a multiple of 3 homicide that occurred Saturday night into Sunday. In this last week, there were a total of 13 homicides, not counting the one that happened Saturday night into Sunday morning. That number of homicides is the same number of homicides that occurred over the total 3 weeks combined, previous 3 weeks. So this was a substantial increase. It is a consequence of primarily street violence. We have not seen an increase in the overall number of shootings this last 4 weeks compared to the same 4-week period last year. We had 101 shooting victims this last 4 weeks. Last year, in 2021, that number was 103. The triple homicide that occurred on Saturday night into Sunday morning, our robbery homicide division was assigned and is actively investigating that. In that event, which was our investigation leads us to believe was being held at an underground illegal party club or warehouse. It appears that a dispute erupted between 2 women that were in that party and at that location. And that in that dispute, it escalated to where men produced handguns and a gunfight ensued. We believe that one of the individuals involved may have been the instigator of that gunfight. We have 1 handgun in custody. We have evidence that suggests that there were a total of 2 handguns in this, and that the other individuals that were hit were innocent victims and also bystanders, where there were 4 additional persons that suffered gunshot wounds. Overall, the department now has 162 homicides this year to date versus 151. That's 11 additional homicides, an increase of 7%. Our violent crime has an increase of 8.6%. That's 1,085 additional violent crimes. The increases that we're seeing continues to be a challenge in robberies, particularly street robberies, as well as our aggravated assaults. Our robberies now stand year to date with a 22% increase. 4 weeks ago, that number was a 21% increase. So there continues to be pressure in the area of street robberies here in Los Angeles. On the property crime front, we've had a total of 5,240 additional property crimes this year to date versus last year. Particular areas of focus continue to be in residential burglaries, some business burglaries, particularly in the Van Nuys, West Valley, and Devonshire areas where window smashes. We've had a string of those. There have been some good investigative efforts by Valley Bureau and arrests. We believe that particular series we may begin to see a decrease in the number of those type of instances. I want to just also take a step back, and as we talk about the increase of violent crime and property crime this year versus last, the department has also begun looking at 2019 as a benchmark year. And the reason for that is that when we saw the crime trends in 2020 with the onset of the pandemic, the numbers became skewed, largely influenced by the changing and societal activities that occurred in 2020 that continued into 2021. In those timeframes, we've had a lot of skewing. That comparison from 2021 to 2022 can offer some statistics that may not be reflective of true pace. What I mean, for an example, is that while we have this increase in street robberies, an overall 22% increase in robberies, when we look back to 2019, we overall have a decrease of 2%. So the overall rate of robberies in the city, we have seen before. We have seen at this level in most recent years. The troubling aspect of it is the rate of guns related in those robberies. And that continues to be our pressure point, that while overall Part 1 crime compared to 2019 was only up 4%, violent crime is up 9%, and homicides are up 39%. The rate of gun violence is the most troubling aspect. So that is why we will continue to focus our resources on identifying gun traffickers, those that are in possession of guns, and particular emphasis to solve crimes that involve gun violence. That's the tide we have to turn, where the impact on this is a multi-3 homicide with 4 additional victims shot over a dispute between 2 women and an illegal nightclub per se. CHP officers stopping a person for a traffic violation, a simple traffic violation that escalates because of the presence of a handgun. The officer-involved shootings that we spoke about here with a ghost gun and other weapons that we see, firearms, is that the propensity for gun violence has increased over this 3-year period, and the ready availability of that is something the department will continue to work with our federal partners and as well as other enforcement partners, but also from an awareness standpoint, is stressing to the public that that the prevalence of guns in our workplace, in our communities, and in our homes, we need to ensure that they're safely stored and secured, that they're not targets for bandits to come and commit burglaries or other thefts that result in them acquiring those weapons. Lastly, and I'll close with personnel stats. We're at 9,335 deployed sworn personnel. Our authorized strength is 9,706. That results in us being 371 fewer deployed sworn members than our budgeted numbers. Civilian personnel at 2,643. That's 199 below our authorized strength. And with that, that concludes my remarks. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you, Chief Moore. Chief, I have a couple of questions. What are we doing to, one, get more guns off the street? I know that you mentioned that you're working with the federal partners and others, but let's take an example. You mentioned that this we just had this shooting in this illegal club that was taking place, a dispute between two females. And you recovered at least one gun there, and you think another gun was used. The gun that was recovered, was that a ghost gun or was that a lawfully registered weapon?
I believe it was, well, I don't believe it was a ghost gun. As far as being lawfully registered, I won't go that far to say the status of that weapon.
Okay, so what are we doing to ensure, if we can, that people are not walking around armed to the teeth?
Yeah. So approximately 2 out of every 10 guns that we recover from the street, it's actually 22%, are ghost guns. And as a reminder, we are going to be reporting those numbers in our weekly stats. Give me for a second. This was something that when we looked, this was Commissioner Decker had asked for this number. It is now on our weekly Los Angeles Police Department crime statistics snapshot. And on the week ending June 4th, we have recovered 754 ghost guns out of a total of 3,556 recovered firearms year to date. Last year at this time, we had recovered 752 ghost guns, and out of a total of 3,676 total firearms booked. So we still see the persistence of the ready availability of these privately manufactured guns. The only reason they exist is because of people who are otherwise unlawfully are unable to lawfully possess a firearm. And our efforts to counter this are a couple different things. One is we are conducting undercover investigations and field investigations to identify those persons trafficking guns. We work with informants and other individuals that are from our community to identify people who are selling these guns. And we'd ask the community that if you're aware of such an operation, that these are instrumentalities of death. And the only people that are getting these handguns and assault weapons are people who are using them against other individuals and creating the violence that we're seeing. They're not being used for any legitimate purpose. The people who own them are conducting and oftentimes involved in criminal enterprise and or escalating what would otherwise be a low-level dispute into gun violence, resulting in people being shot and people dying. The other matter is we have worked with and will continue to work with the district attorney, who is petitioning our MasterCard, Visa, and American Express to stop the sale of ghost gun kits on the internet. Commonly, people will use interchange such as one of those cards in order to purchase online these kits. And we believe that the supply, cutting that supply by recognizing that those kits only exist to support an illicit market is another control point. It's incremental. It won't stop the entire flood. 8 of 10 guns are still guns that are possessed by people stealing them or buying them and then unfortunately resorting to their use in some crime of violence. But our work also continues with district attorney's office to ensure that prior felons found in possession of guns, that we're seeing the full prosecution of those individuals, and that gun crimes such as robberies and others that involve the use of a firearm, that these added state enhancements be applied. And we are seeing some results with the prosecutor now charging those added enhancements. We believe that that will act as a deterrent to those on the street that recognize if you use a gun, you suffer the consequence of a threat or at least a possibility, significant possibility of having to spend additional years in custody. So there are a couple different prongs on this. Lastly, the department is supportive of gun buybacks as an awareness, not so much that they take thousands of guns off the street, but from an awareness that if you have a gun or firearm that you want to, that's a nuisance, that you can surrender that weapon, that weapon will be destroyed. It will not end up in the hands of anyone else. And it just as a reminder for people to be mindful, a source of guns for suspects continue to be burglaries, people breaking into cars where guns are being improperly stored and unsafely stored. And then those guns end up being involved in street crimes.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Soboroff, I see you have your mic open.
Sure. Chief, on Summit of the Americas, I have a question, but before I do, I just think it's important to, again, acknowledge and congratulate everyone who worked on the planning and the implementation and the actual day-to-day. That was a very difficult, high-risk situation, and I think that every single person who was involved deserved a thanks and congratulations. And now I want to shift to my question. We estimated that the cost of the department would be about $18 million, I think. And my question is, what are the potential sources of reimbursement? What is the process for looking at each of those potential sources of reimbursement? And, what's the odds? What do you think?
Well, the formal process is that the city engaged in the Summit of the Americas without a reimbursement scheme identified. That this was seen as a world-class city hosting an event inviting the Americas, 34 countries to Los Angeles, and over this 5-day period, that the cost would be absorbed by the agencies involved. Now, informally, there are ongoing conversations with our elected officials at the federal level, as well as our appointed officials. So I had the opportunity to speak with Secretary Mayorkas from the Department of Homeland Security, and we certainly would look to that. Now, as a department, we policed and provided for the security of this event in a safe, secure fashion without regard to the reimbursement scheme. But I do have every faith and confidence that our elected leaders in Congress, our president, the state, that there are mechanisms that could step forward to help the city recover some of the costs that were associated with this event. The odds on this is that's not my area of expertise, so I won't predict that. But I know.
What about was the amount consistent with the estimate of 18 million?
No, I think we came in lower than that. We were able by day, we started this on Monday, and when we started seeing and monitoring crowd traffic and social media and various no derogatory information, we were able to start pulling back on resources on Thursday, Friday, into Saturday. So some of our earlier projections, I believe, will come in high. We have that is one of our tasks before us right now, is identifying all the associated.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner Sobroff. Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Commissioner Briggs. A few notes. I do want to add my congratulations to the department and the team that worked on the Summit of the Americas, a great team effort. I'd also like to add, it was very heartening to hear that the officer that's been in the hospital for such a long time with COVID potentially will be released. That is certainly good news. And of course, we're very hopeful that the CHP officer continues on the road to recovery. So thank you for those updates, chiefs. But my question today is related to the report on violence, but also your report on personnel strength. And we're entering a new fiscal year for the city. We did not meet the personnel department, and therefore the police department did not meet the hiring goals for this fiscal year. I'd like to know, Chief, the efforts underway, continued efforts, and your estimation on the efforts and whether they will be successful in trying to get to the goal of 60 recruits in each class for the months allocated. And I wonder if you can give us an update on that.
Yes, so we will close this fiscal year in June of this month, hiring more police officers as recruits than any time since 2008. So on that metrics, 576 officers were hired. The challenge was, our goal was 740. And particularly the last 6 months is where that we saw challenges in getting the monthly 60 recruits per class that would have allowed us to reach that threshold. Our efforts with the general manager, Ms. Dana Brown, and the personnel department is twofold. One, marketing and outreach, which has largely returned. The ability to meet in person, to go out and recruit for recruit classes, qualified candidates. Our marketing effort is including advertising, particularly on social media, has gotten back into pre-COVID type of frequency and persistence. The other matter is the processing time for qualified candidates. We've reinitiated the expedited processing time so that if a candidate desires to be hired in 90 days, which I would believe most would, is that the personnel department, working with the department, will expedite so that the current means of 8 months to a year that often takes for a person to be qualified to start an academy class can be reduced to 90 days or less. The effort of housing subsidy that Commissioner Sobroff has engaged a number of philanthropic and others within Los Angeles to incentivize recruits with a 2-year stipend to reduce the cost of housing as an incentive will be augmented by a matter that I'm speaking with the mayor and I'm speaking with a number of council people. We believe it's also appropriate given these goals and the significance of the fact that CHP are hiring over 1,000 people in these next 2 years, and other agencies are also similarly pulling from a very limited workforce or applicant base, is that we provide further incentives, whether it be a recruitment incentive for those, for the candidates themselves, for attracting them to the academy seat, and then incentivizing it for completion, successful completion of the academy. I'll be bringing a proposal before the commission here. I would expect in the next few weeks. I've tasked Chief Choi and Captain McCraney for that. Secondly, is to incentivize members of this organization to find qualified applicants. There's an old adage that we are our best recruiters, and I believe in that also. This second avenue of an incentive program is something the department engaged in 2007 and 2008. And we'd like to re-engage that as a means of, again, of bolstering these numbers. While we've hired more than we have in more than a decade, those numbers are insufficient given the dynamics in the workforce where we've lost. This year, we'll lose about 530 to 550 of our personnel through standard attrition. And so we're not gaining ground after a steep and terrible fall over the fiscal year prior, where we lost 630 plus of our personnel while only hiring 79. That has created quite a deficit for us that will take our focus and energies to pull out of. Now, as far as my confidence on this, I'm encouraged by Ms. Brown's initiative, by her commitment to remove some of the hurdles and some of the perceived obstacles, including the timeline it takes to get to determine a person is qualified or not. And I remain committed that we'll follow that closely. We have and will continue to loan personnel to the personnel department to assist in that process as well.
Thank you, Chief. I look forward to talking to you more about those process and the incentive program. Thank you, Commissioner Briggs.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker. Commissioner Bonner.
Yes, please. Thank you. Couple of things. First, on the Summit of Americas, I also was very impressed with not only how the ultimate efforts played out, but to watch some of the planning and so on was very important. I think a lot of people talk and think about that event as if it was one large event, and it was actually numerous events at multiple locations across the city that required a lot of careful planning and coordination with a number of agencies. And I wanted to thank in particular Commander Paulson and her colleagues in OSO who allowed me to kind of follow along a lot of those planning efforts, and then to see it played out, flawlessly, I think was all the more encouraging. So I appreciate that. Chief, I had a question. This is going back now to something that you had mentioned in a prior crime report, but not today, and that's the issue of the street takeovers. And I've only, read a little bit about and been seeing a little bit more about some of these events that are occurring both in the city limits and then in Compton and other parts of the region. But can you comment briefly? And I think some of these are not just street racing, but they end up being very violent events where people who live in a community or may just be walking in an area then find themselves surrounded by a number of cars that are speeding and recklessly kind of bantering about. So can you comment, Lily, on what that picture looks like? Are these anomalous events, or is it a trend that's starting to take shape? And more importantly, what the department's role and level of activity is directed toward this?
So it is trending up. It is a phenomenon that's occurring not just here in Los Angeles and in this region, but in other parts of the country as well. And it's a very dangerous and disturbing one. It largely involves car enthusiasts that have utilize high performance vehicles that are outfitted with modified emissions and suspensions and efforts to increase their performance, if you will, and then they conduct these quote unquote spontaneous sideshows. And that's where essentially it's a street takeover where they demonstrate and recklessly drive those vehicles many times and doing donuts in the circle and celebratory matters that have included the use of fireworks and more recently gunplay. People armed with firearms that are firing into the air, and then other instances in which innocent bystanders or conflicts exist, and then gunfire exists and is exchanged during these exhibitions. For the department, first of all, from the education, our effort is to communicate that these are highly dangerous. There's a huge number of spectators that will gather at these locations. The use of social media is rampant. Underground clubs and organizations that communicate via social media of these gatherings, and then they draw the crowds through the membership in those Instagram accounts and others to then witness these engagements. It's been glorified. I believe I've reported on this before in Hollywood. It's been the entertainment industry has made a bit of a celebration of these as some type of cultural event, which I find disturbing. And we're asking parents and others that when these individuals don't operate in a vacuum. They're members of clubs and organizations and groups that are known to others, and that their efforts should be to discourage that. There are 2 women that were killed just this past weekend, just outside the city in Compton, that it's not clear what their role or engagement was with a street sideshow or takeover that was occurring simultaneously. So the examples of death and injury are real, and you don't have to go very far to find them, and they occur here in the city as well. Our efforts also, other than just education and awareness, is that we have marshaled resources, finite resources from our traffic divisions to run 7 days a week, a monitoring and enforcement effort that we make working through overt and covert through public sources, attempt to identify where these gatherings will be. We utilize the resources of our helicopter or airships to travel around this large region to look for these gatherings in an effort to disrupt them and also take enforcement efforts. In the aftermath of these gatherings, we also are following up and seizing vehicles by working with the court that when we have license plates and other information that identify those persons responsible. Lastly, there's an effort going on with state legislatures to try to identify what are the other means of the law that can be used to increase the penalties against those individuals that are engaged in this reckless and dangerous activity. Ultimately, it's going to take the public and the members of our community that have some fringe or associated relationship with these individuals to change this conduct. Our efforts can mitigate it and can have a braking effect, and there are consequences. Hundreds of vehicles that have been impounded. We'll follow up with you with the number of impounds, the number of arrests and citations that have occurred year to date. And I have most recently, in fact, you were yesterday on our crime call, directed that our traffic divisions begin reporting on at least a monthly basis what their efforts have been on this engagement to demonstrate to the public that we are doing what can be done to take enforcement, that there is not a lack of attention on this or a lack of us viewing this in something other than a very serious and dangerous risk that's occurring to our streets. And by the way, we have, I will say we have experienced some success, but the persistence of this involves the popularity of it, the region in which that we exist, that there's so many opportunities for this to happen. And I think a sense that people can operate under the radar and that the consequences that it won't touch them. Of course, we know that's not to be the case and that people lose their life and suffer injuries that thought that they were just going to go out and see some celebratory event.
I appreciate that. Maybe either a quick comment here, or you can address this as you pull together some additional information. But I'm curious to know a little bit more just about when you think about all of the people who, whether they're what I would call perpetrators, people driving or promoting or attending. Is it are they groups of people who also are involved in other types of criminal activity, or is it car enthusiasts who are really focused on this kind of what they view as entertainment and fun? But what is the connection, if any, with other elements of crime?
Most recently, it's been those that carry firearms involved in, so they're engaged in this celebratory or these exhibitions, but now they're actually carrying guns. And it's almost it's one of those situations that we see this escalation of time where the tactics continue to evolve and become more and more reckless. So it was a point where you'd have a gathering and perhaps a street takeover or sideshow that was just an exhibition of this reckless actions there. Now you see drag racing, then you see now people introducing fireworks, pyrotechnics, and then you start seeing people with gunfire. And so it's this recklessness, the sense that it just continues to spiral and escalate. It is, I believe, again, I think one of the challenging parts of this is that while I know it's frustrating to the public, the entertainment industry, arcade industry, others use this as a form of entertainment or use this activity and represent it as while it might be deviant behavior, it's not seen as something that is being openly criticized enough. I believe that there's far too many people that see this as an allowable location to blow off steam or activity that they somehow rationalize in their mind as acceptable. And as a department, we need to provide enforcement that demonstrates otherwise, but we also need a public in our communities and others to act responsibly. We have seen this problem before. You have to go back a couple decades where they established race venues out in the eastern part of San Bernardino that people could lawfully conduct. There are street exhibitions on closed and safe raceways, and we would welcome again providing a safe venue for this type of exhibition, a city street, a freeway, that it's a freeway takeover, both of which occur is not that vehicle.
Well, I will look forward to whatever information is forthcoming or available, and if you could include also a brief comment on anything you're seeing in terms of the preferred sites or locations. These I know they have some element of spontaneity to them, but I'm just curious to know also if there's any particular areas or that are more attractive for this type of activity than others. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Thank you, Chief Moore. Appreciate it. At this time, we're going to go to item 2 on the agenda, public comment. Madam Secretary, please get the first caller.
Okay, our first speaker is Betty Lay.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
Public comment and some of the agenda items and Chief's report.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to send out prayers to our CHP officer from West Valley. I happen to know several of the officers over at West Valley, so I'm staying in contact with them. He's currently stable, which is very good news. And I appreciate Chief's report as always, and I support LAPD. For the agenda items, I'm supporting 4E, F, G, H, I, J, and 5A. And I just want I just want everybody to know that prayers are going out for all law enforcement agencies. And this is just a very rough time right now, and hopefully we can get through this and get back to normal. And I do want to congratulate LAPD and all of the agencies involved with Summit of America. I was able to stay in contact with a couple of the captains that kept me updated, so that was a plus. And as I report every time, I'm against this bluestone. Officers need to be tested for free. And with that, everybody stay safe and healthy. Thank you very much. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 3146.
Did that work? Hi, good morning.
Yes, what items are
My phone is breaking up, but I'd have a little bit of the after action. Let's see, some of the closed session stuff and the mind of a mass shooter.
okay, 3 minutes?
Great. Now the J Soba today, yeah, the two officers, they ran up to this guy. What bravery. But it turned out he was unarmed and he's dead. Now, Eric Rivera is unarmed. He's dead. Eric Valencia is unarmed. He's dead. Mark Rodriguez, he was shot. Jose Guerrera, he was shot. And then a dude, Garcia, was what I'm come to talk about today. Okay. There was one officer, and this was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago now, that the vacationing commission. There was an officer who was behind a car. He shot 12 times at that Garcia guy. There was another officer, he shot 5 to 6 times. Then there was an officer behind him. He shot 4 times, but he backed away first and then started shooting. He could have shot the officer's partner to the left of him. Did you guys see that 3 weeks ago? He backed away and then started shooting. And the officer to his left, he had to say, "Get up here." He told him, quote, "Stand by, get up here." Why did the officer back away? Why did they shoot the guy? It's 12 out of one, another 5 or 6 out of this guy, 4 more out of the other officer who backed away and started shooting late. Looked like he was shooting into the air. Did you guys catch that? The suspect had a BB gun, which is dangerous. Okay. The after action program. Okay, let's move on. Now, I had seen there was a La Brea stabbing, right? And there was a 1 punch to the face at the Union Station, right? So I heard a story that in Phoenix, there was a lone girl and a guy went in and beat her up and kicked her head down onto the floor. It's just like the La Brea stabbing. And the 1 punch to the face, I noticed these people, they wait around until a female is by herself and then they attack the female. This mind is the same mind at Uvalde, the same mind at Parkland, same mind as the Buffalo shooter, who's a white racist, but it's the same mind. What I came up with, right? The upsetness, but Commission, this is what I think. The upsetness between black and white shouldn't be determined by a bunch of completely mentally ill 18-year-olds. Everybody gets upset about mentally ill 18-year-olds, and they are defining how black and white interact. These are a bunch of little children. This should not define how grown adults who can cope and adapt, how we interact together. But that's what's happening. These Parklands and these stabbings, and whether it's black or white, is determining how grown adults call each other racist or don't call each other racist. It's the same mind. These people are messed up, mentally ill freaks, okay? And it shouldn't determine how grown adults.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Matios Kadeng.
Hello?
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
All of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah, so item 4E on the agenda is a donation for a Scope Now subscription, $7,000. And the Brennan Center for Justice out of NYU actually just did a assessment and summary of third-party surveillance tools that LAPD uses, and this is one of the ones they covered. So Scope Now, the company claims its tools can automatically and anonymously find and extract social media data and conduct analysis to flag particular behaviors or keywords selected by the clients. It creates interactive visualizations by merging location data, consumer records, social media posts, and metadata. Its sources are major social media platforms, court records through Pacer, consumer records, and any information available online. Now, we know this is going to be used to criminalize and target Black and Brown communities, and we know that this is going to work in tandem with facial recognition technology, even though the LAPD says it isn't. But if we look at the Scope Now site itself, it very openly talks about how images can provide a wealth of value to open source information investigations. They can show what subjects look like, locations where the subject has been. So images are clearly an integral part of this software and this application. And it even talks about reverse image searching, which really is just recognizing somebody's face and pulling it up on the internet. Now, this is just used to amass a bunch of data in pursuit of actionable intelligence, is what they call actionable, meaning they can use it to criminalize folks. Where does this go? Well, if we look at another agenda item, 4A, it talks about threat assessment centers, which are located in joint regional intelligence centers. And this is a grant through the LA Sheriff's Department. Now, this interagency connectivity is kind of important because the LAPD openly admits to using facial recognition technology in one setting, and that's through the LACRIS database. And that's the digital mugshot system that the LA Sheriff's Department uses. And now LAPD can enter images into this database and pull information that way using facial recognition technology. So even though the LAPD put this fucking like ridiculous claim that they don't use facial recognition technology through Scope Now, they can very well pull an image from Scope Now and implement it into LACRIS or input it into LACRIS and use facial recognition technology in that way. And you know, LAPD doesn't even abide by its own policy, so that's a bit of a farce in itself. Now, this LACRIS database actually has 9 million mugshots and 3 million images of people's scars, marks, and tattoos. It's probably more now. And we know that these people are predominantly Black and Brown. So this notion that this software is innocuous is a sham, and this $7,000 donation is just a foothold to expand the LAPD budget. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Q Jean-Marie.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
I'd like to speak to all of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah, so I was watching the news and saw Secret Service tackled this lady with a bullhorn who got close to them. And I think violence flows from the top down because that was uncalled for, right? It's this idea that we keep promoting violence, but telling people not to commit violence. America has a gun culture issue, right? They say guns don't kill people, people kill people, yet law enforcement, NRA, and all of those people are promoting putting more and more guns in people's hands, right? Guns don't kill people, people kill people, but let's put more guns in people's hands. In 2020, I've stated this before, but needs to be stated again. In 2020, nearly 20.7 million guns were purchased, right? And then in January of that year, 60%, there was a 60% increase, right? The largest single month recorded since 1988. And roughly 8.5 million people across the US purchased their first firearm in 2020. More than 2 million guns were sold in January, an 80% jump, and the third highest monthly total on record, right? To the person who called and said that this is just a few mentally ill people, 31 members of the Patriot Front was just arrested in Ohio this weekend, right? When it comes to racism, when people like Tucker Carlson and Fox News peddle replacement theory. This is not just a couple of mentally ill people. Even right here in our police department, right? You have, or in my law enforcement departments, we have people like, you know, even in an interview, the sheriff said, you know, people are out there, especially on the right, the conservative crowd on the far right. He continued, and he said, and what is 80% of our workforce? Conservative and far right, right? The sheriff said that, right? So we know that the bias is real, and we know that law enforcement continues to cater to a certain sector of our society, those who are probably most likely going to do racist stuff, right? There was just a recent audit of 5 law enforcement agencies, including the sheriff department. They didn't do LAPD, but I'm sure if they did LAPD, they would find that there were members of some of those groups that we're talking about, the Proud Boys and the 3%ers, right? And they found bias in most of those cases. And the fact that we never found out about the George Floyd Valentine's card and all of these type of things, we know these things exist. We know it exists even in LAPD. So we want to deal with guns. We have to deal with the gun culture. You can't take guns off the street and gun buybacks and then sell them back again.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Steve Rogers.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I'd like to go to the chief's report and the report on COVID-19 update. He said there was an increase of 186 over 3 weeks. That's 62 per week. But what he didn't mention was how many of those officers were fully vaccinated. I noticed that in prior reports, he would give the number. It could be 7 out of 8 that was vaccinated, but he stopped doing that. And I'm wondering why. I think the reason is because there's money involved in the vaccination with Bluestone getting a no-bid contract. Betty Lay mentions that on a regular basis. Yet there's no investigation. And I think at a certain point, we have to look and see that it's not working, okay? It's not working. If you want to do something to improve morale, you could have those officers that are maybe at home or being disciplined for standing up for their religious or medical or issues of conscience and bring them back to work. We obviously need all hands on deck. Crime is going through the roof. Morale is down. What are you doing to improve morale? You talk about recruitment. The best recruiters, as the chief said, are the officers themselves. 90% of them or more would not recommend the LAPD as a career to their friends and family. So that's a reality. We need to have honesty and truth. Thank you, Commissioner Bonin, for mentioning the street takeovers. That's something that really needs to be addressed. And Chief, if you could mention what the consequences are, if there are vehicles being impounded, what exactly is the consequence? Crime is rising because there are no consequences for crime. We have basically looting in slow motion, which is in the form of theft. People are giving up on reporting crime because of the lack of response from the LAPD, and I'm not blaming the officers. The officers are doing the best they can under the circumstances. There are not enough officers and too many crimes, too many criminals being let out repeatedly. The gun issue is a distraction. It is completely a distraction. We have a Second Amendment in this country. Try walking out in parts of Los Angeles, downtown Hollywood, and tell me you feel safe. You don't see police officers in key locations where there are tourists and high pedestrian density. We need them there. The demographics of crime. Let's get these questions answered. What is the demographics of crime as stated by the victims in their crime reports? It's disproportionately Black and brown. That's just a reality. Now you can talk about why it's like that, but then when people say, well, Black and brown are disproportionately stopped and arrested and incarcerated, look at the crime, okay, the criminals. Let's reduce the fear and incidence of crime. There's a lot to say in 3 minutes. I didn't appreciate being censored last time. You're very selective, Commissioner Briggs.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Javier. Javier, you're on.
Hi there.
Hi.
Thank you very much. I would like to kind of reiterate a suggestion that has been made by others. And I'm sure there's a reason why you no longer announce the next person on deck. But I've noticed that you know, when you did give names, we were ready. And now you have delays and whatever. And I don't know if that's an internal decision, but I think it should be reexamined because I think it will enable more people to make comments. And sometimes more is not better, but I think in this case it is. I want to speak to the chief's report on the Americas event downtown, and I've never seen an event in Los Angeles, and I'm a lifer, born and raised here down here in the harbor, and I've never seen an event that was so large and potentially problematic with everything else that's going on in the world that went so flawlessly. It was complex, but the great communication and coordination, not only among the agencies involved, but certainly in terms of communication to the public about traffic and the maps and avoid these areas. I don't think I've ever seen that, whether it was the Olympics or anything else. And I know the chief spoke about what a great event it was for LAPD. But I think the way they handled it was probably one of the best management operations that I've seen ever. Also, I wanted to talk about the LAPD response to the shooting of the CHP officer last night. We're seeing in other parts of the country, and probably Uvalde, Texas is the worst, where it took 77 minutes. That would never happen in LA. And I think we sometimes forget, how lucky we are to have professional organizations like LAPD and the sheriffs and Long Beach and other cities. And people are quick to attack the police departments, but it's moments like this that we realize how lucky that we are. I also wanted to ask about the smash and grabs and the increase in violent robberies, and what the department is trying to do relative to that. And in terms of the officer involved shootings growing, violence is growing in the society, every level, even without guns. And I think that we have to, take a look at that in considering how we deal with the police department, how we attack them. Finally, the COVID vaccine situation, it's become way more complex than we ever thought it would be. And, and multiple shots. So I think we have to give our officers a break.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have T.
Hello,
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
all of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
First off, just want to say power and strength to all the families impacted by police violence. Epic fail in the jails. I know there's no longer a mask mandate, but these officers continue to spread COVID in the jails. That is an epic fail. The Summit of the Americas, y'all spent $18 million. They had a fence. It looked like the Guantanamo Bay around the convention center. We have a homeless crisis right now. And y'all mustered up 18 million for the Summit of Americas, in which they left Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba out of. We had the People's Summit right down the road, which included Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. I wonder why they were left out. Possibly about Nicaragua's involvement in drug trafficking with the US CIA and military into US neighborhoods, black and brown occupants. That was a problem, and it's still a problem. Let's not forget the anniversary of the bombing or the explosion, since we're coming up on the July 4th, of the South LA neighborhood, which killed Roman Reyes and Ozzie Hutchinson. Those neighbors, our community members, are still displaced, still out without housing and implementation of funding for them to get back on their feet. Let's not forget also the commemoration of Juneteenth. I've not heard one person bring that up. Maybe because white supremacy is still in the very fabric of the very foundation of the so-called country on Turtle Island. 2 years after the free so-called emancipation, people were still enslaved, but we still have the prison, the school, the prison pipeline happening, which is a modern day, resemblance of slavery, along with the slave patrols in black and brown neighborhoods, killing black and brown bodies day after day. And we have zero accountability, over 700 killed by LAPD and Sheriff's Department over the last 7 years, and no accountability. This is disgusting. A sham of a so-called commission, and you keep filtering dollars. Police don't keep people safe, resources do. None of y'all stopped the Buffalo shooter. None of y'all stopped those children being killed. In fact, they waited how long for the police to go in the building before all those kids?
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Nini.
Hello,
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
all of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to just echo what some folks have been saying about the concerns about the, of course, how LAPD continues to get more tools and gadgets to continue to surveil and harass and harm and in some cases kill folks in the community. I think it's pretty disheartening knowing that there were thousands upon thousands of people taking to the street demanding not only what was like the state sanctioned murder that happened with George Floyd, but echoing the same things folks in communities face every single day, knowing that police they can't trust the police and they can't call upon police when violence every day occurs. And so it's pretty interesting to see the way in which abusers and abusers, I mean, both LAPD and the state, who of course provides their budget and approves their budget, how they continue to make up lies and then be able to spend more resources to be able to package these lies, whether it's officer involved shooting, whether it's less lethal or so-called less lethal, which we know people are still end up getting killed when utilizing those tools as well. But the expansion of social media monitoring, the expansion of surveillance, and the expansion of data entry to be able to continue to stalk our communities. And so the contract with all the different contracts as well, including the ones with the fusion centers, which the fusion centers, there are over, if you look at where they're located, there are so many fusion centers as well. And it's not only the data from the cameras, from the automated license plate readers, but also how it's analyzed even if you look at their own history. So when you look at the different fusion centers, there is a report that was provided by the Committee of Homeland Security on Governmental Affairs talking about saying that it's a waste at state and local intelligence fusion centers, knowing that it's flawed, irrelevant, useless, and inappropriate and unrelated to terrorism. And so how it's utilized, how these domestic terrorism and how these events that harm the community are utilized as an opportunity for LAPD and private companies to continue to expand and to increase their profits, which is similar to what as well the scope now is utilizing as well, and how it's going to be utilizing facial recognition as well as pulling data from Strava, which is something that a lot of cyclists and a lot of folks in the community utilize to continue to surveil and harm folks. If you look at that history, if you look at scope now and the expansion, 7K, that's going to be utilized to.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Blue.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
The chief's report, please, and just public comment.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to say a big thank you to all our LAPD officers who worked the Summit of the Americas, working tirelessly for 14, 16, sometimes 18 hours a day. They did a fantastic job, absolutely greatness at its best. And thank you just every day to them for being out there and utilizing their greatness. And you know, they're really out there in the communities, and um, with the foot beats, and just being out there and keeping us safe from the nonsense that's going out in Los Angeles. Just like one caller said, no, you cannot walk Hollywood Boulevard or downtown LA without being petrified, not even taking the bus or the train. So it's unfortunate. You know, we're tired of these officers being ambushed. I realized last night was a CHP officer, but you know, this nonsense has to stop. These enhancements have to go in place, and hopefully in a few months we'll resolve that with the new district attorney. But you know, LA has become a cesspool of violence and smash and grabs, and it's heartbreaking now. A new element to this is the stupid, you know, street racing and the takeovers. Nonsense. These grown-up people should be working and taking care of their families and being home instead of killing these two innocent women last night. Just absolutely stupidness at its best. So our hearts go out to those families. Chief Moore, Mr. Briggs, and Mr. Soboroff, thank you to you for always supporting our LAPD officers. We appreciate them, and we're rooting for you to get these classes back and get more recruits, and please get more officers out in the streets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have committee chair. Committee chair, you're on. Okay, we'll come back to committee. Elisa Avalos.
Hello.
Hi, what item would you like to speak on?
The chiefs and public comments.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I would like to start off by the takeover of the streets. My frustration is if our council, for instance, I live in District 7, if our councilwoman sees that there's circles around in 4 corners, why not sit with your captain or your officers and say, let's come up with a plan? Now, there's more apartments going up in District 7, and there's a shortage of officers. It makes me feel sometimes as if we live in Gotham City. Now, I don't think it's okay for our councilwoman not supporting our police officers. Now, she just got reelected. I hope and pray that she'll start giving the respect to our captain and to our senior leads and meet with them, so we won't be living in Gotham City, because I feel like we have a lack of communication. My other thing, summer's coming up. We all know that everything goes up. More gang violence, people being impatient. We need officers, and it's not okay for our council people to not even say in public, I want to thank our officers for what they're doing, because at the end of the day, we can say whatever we want about them, but when we're in trouble and we have no one to call, we call our police officers. So let's thank them. And thank you. And I still think that the chief needs to be voted in so he can do his job the way he needs to, because our council people are not officers. They didn't go to school to become officers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Zach Sherwin.
Hi.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
I don't really like speaking about any of them, but I will address all of the items on today's agenda.
Okay, 3 minutes.
A few procedural or administrative items up top. Why don't you either say who's up next or at least tell us why you stopped doing that, Briggs? It's like such a small thing for you to just get out there with. even to demonstrate that you're hearing people ask for it. So that's the first. Next, city council is meeting in person. Why aren't you? And that question is honestly rhetorical. I am certainly more than capable of filling in my own explanations, foremost of which are this commission's commitments to opacity and suppression of community voices, but it's still shameful and needs to be mentioned. Next, after not meeting for 3 weeks since May 24th, why do you not A, find time for like a makeup meeting, and or B, give speakers more time, even an extra minute, to speak today? Not that that would be sufficient, but at least it would be a token acknowledgement of the time that has elapsed since you last met. Commissioners, you need to change your webpage because on it you claim to be the citizen's voice in police affairs, but you clearly only represent some citizens, specifically the ones who support LAPD. This is clear. You could only have this demonstrated for you by looking at your questions just today. When you were all so quick and eager to congratulate the chief on the great job he did with the Summit of the Americas, you heaped accolades on him. You were waxing eloquent in your praise. So where is the counterweight? When do we hear your criticism of the LAPD? When do you ask the chief the hard questions? Only Bonner ever makes a show of pushing back. And when he does, it's with nervous chuckles. And we also know from the past that he shares his questions with the chief in advance. Some commissioners don't even stay on camera for the duration of public comment. I would urge any members of the public who are watching this on Zoom to take a look at the tile array right now, literally as I'm speaking. So I'm past the point of expecting you to represent citizens' voices. I certainly don't think you provide responsive and effective government as you also purport to do, but at least change your webpage, because the contrast between what this government body says it does and what it actually does is downright Orwellian. Chief, why did you say in your report that there, quote, continues to be pressure with robberies, but then you don't say a corresponding thing about the fact that officers are killing people at a rate that seems on course to exceed last year's? Why is what the community does characterized as continued pressure, but your officers' actions are presented without commentary as just cut and dried statistics? It's always on the community to address problems in the entertainment industry and the quote unquote arcade industry, which maybe is connected to the video game industry. Why don't you take care of it with your budget more? I don't think you get to have it both ways. I yield the rest of my.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back to committee chair.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chief. I just want to address again the fact that Officer Cesar Contreras was removed from Lakeview Terrace, and will continue to come into the meetings to ask you to please contact me, and we can meet in person, we can meet at or a town hall meeting, so you can address that, because the whole community is asking themselves the same reason. I mean, they're asking themselves the reason why you removed them. Although we know that Monica Rodriguez requested you to do that, and you didn't follow the proper protocol, I feel, and we all feel that you didn't. So if you can explain that to us, or if you want to call me personally, it's up to you, but I will continue to ask you that. Also, the officers from Foothill Division that I know of, they're doing a good job, but they can do a better job because the law changed so much to help other criminals. And so you're not doing anything, I see, to help the officers. What can you and I, or we, the community, help to get the law changed in order for the officers to do their job and apprehend anybody that violates the law? As participated in crimes. Please, I urge you to get back to me as soon as possible. I don't think I would have to send you an email or a phone call, because I don't think that's gonna work. But I guess by me coming to this meeting, I'm addressing you every time that I come in. Please get back to us. Get back to me. That's me. Thank you so much.
So to the committee chair, if you'll email me or call my office, I'm happy to speak with you.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 1607. Caller ending 1607.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
Hi, my name is W. Blower, and I'd like to speak on all of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
On July 27th, 2021, Mayor Garcetti and Council President Martinez addressed the city of Los Angeles. Ms. Martinez stated this is truly a pandemic of the unvaccinated, and we should hold each other accountable. The mayor stated that you should know your status and get tested. Unfortunately, these words don't align with the city's actions. Now let's look at the data provided by the Chief of Police. Chief of Police briefed the Police Commission 15 times. From these 15 times, he gave a breakdown between the vaccinated and unvaccinated infections 9 times. On January the 11th, 2022, the Chief of Police advised the LAPD is 84% fully vaccinated. Taking the average from the data provided, it shows 73.95% of these who got COVID are fully vaccinated. Today, the chief reported 186 new infections. I wonder how this is going to affect your average. City of LA received $1.2 billion from the Biden Build Back Better COVID Relief Act to spend as a city wishes. There is a clause, however, under Section 603F, essentially stating that if the City of Los Angeles accepts this money, the city shall abide by all executive orders from the government, which includes vaccines and who knows what else. Your mandate is a far cry from public safety. It's a complete money grab. Your own data does not support your feeble claim. Just like Mayor Garcetti stated back in July 2021, know your status, get tested. City of Los Angeles is only testing the unvaccinated. While your own numbers show vaccinated are at a higher risk of getting COVID, which is also supported by the Walgreens published report of COVID positive reporting of the vaccinated and unvaccinated. The City of Los Angeles is being discriminatory at the enforcement of this mandate. For example, DWP has yet to test anyone for COVID as of June 13, 2022. Council President Martinez said we should hold people accountable. I agree. A recent report from Pfizer said, I'm sorry, I got messed up. The reported the vaccine is 95% effective. They were wrong. Pfizer now admits the vaccine is 12% effective for 1 week, then drops to 1% shortly after. If this is truly about public safety, you would drop this mandate. You are putting public safety at risk, the welfare of citizens, visitors, workers of the City of Los Angeles at risk. The city's crime rate, as you heard today from the chief, is at an all-time high. This vaccine mandate is neither safe or effective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. President, that was our final speaker.
Thank you very much. Let's go to item 3 on the agenda, AB 361. I move that we find the COVID-19 state of emergency remains active and state or local officials have imposed or recommended risk reduction measures. That on June 6, 2022, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health reported that transmission remains high due to highly infectious COVID-19 subvariants. The increase in cases has translated to an increase in the number of people hospitalized with COVID-19. The average number of COVID positive patients per day in LA County has increased from 1 month ago. In accordance with AB 361, this Brown Act body has reconsidered the circumstances of the state of emergency, and the state of emergency continues to present imminent risks to the health and safety of the attendees and continues to directly impact the ability of the board members to meet safely in person. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. At this time, we're going to go to the consent agenda. We have items A through L. Are there any commissioners that want to discuss any of the items on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I move that we move to approve all the items on the consent agenda items. Is there a second?
Second?
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you. At this time, we're going to go to item 5 on the agenda, which is the department's after action report with respect to implementation plan command staff training. Can we bring forth Deputy Chief Mark Reyna, please? Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, Commissioners. Chief Moore.
You're on mute, Chief Reyna.
Okay, went back on mute. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me. I was asked to report back regarding after action report recommendations specifically for command staff training related to incident command system. So I'd just like to briefly kind of summarize some things. So currently we have 115 command staff members. We had 55 or 48% of our command staff had previously attended what we call command and control training. That's training that teaches command staff to take active leadership roles, mitigate critical situations, properly assign roles during critical incidents, reinforce the leadership role, managing your resources, building confidence with critical situations and critical decision-making in those situations, and also included use of force updates, policies, and procedures. So that's just command staff. 48% of our command staff had gone through that. Over 8,000 members of the department had attended command and control training. That training ended in July of last year, and we kind of morphed into our mass violence tactical response, which also incorporates some of that command and control. And also we created a new course, which we spoke about before, which is our critical thinking and force options course. It's an 8-hour course. It also includes the command and control training aspect that I just discussed. And so far, there's been approximately 400 department members who have attended that training, and command staff will be required to also attend that training for the critical thinking and force options. In addition, the National Incident Management System, the NIMS, that's kind of the overall FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Association, and our state emergency management. FEMA and the state and the NIMS system is a system for incident command across the country. So no matter who's working with who, it's LAPD with the fire department, with our state partners, federal partners, whoever it may be, everybody understands how that incident command system and the incident management team works. So we are required as supervisors for LAPD to attend ICS 300 and ICS 400 training. And currently we're roughly about 95% for both of those classes of command staff that have attended those training. And that leads into, and you received our summary, what we call our TEACS training. So the Texas A&M Extension Campus is affiliated with Department of Homeland Security and with FEMA, and they put on a very, very intense ICS type of training that brings in law enforcement, fire, and emergency response executives from around the country. And it's a full IMT of a team of 60, and they're going through this very, very enhanced and robust training. We spoke about it before on this commission regarding that training, and that it was the chief's mandate that all command staff attend that training at some time. So we started that mandate probably a little less than a year ago. And right now, 49 or 43% of our command staff have attended that training with more scheduled. It's one session per month each month of the year, and we are guaranteed to have at least 3 spots per the TEACS staff. We do have retired command staff from LAPD that are TEACS instructors at there, and they try to get us in as best as possible, and they also call us at the last minute to fill those spots. And if it's not command staff that's attending the TEACS training, we also allow our lieutenants and our sergeants to go to that training, because they're also part of that IMT. They're also part of that incident command system and assisting us, and particularly when they're promoting from sergeant to lieutenant, lieutenant to captain, they have that training already. That being said, with the help of Dr. Pinnell from our Police Training Education and our Emergency Services Division and Training Bureau, over the last probably 6 or 8 months or so, we worked with Emergency Services Division, Major Incident Response Team, and they're kind of our ICS experts for the department, and we created a new 8-hour course. We wanted to have a course that was very similar to TEACS, but we wanted our own. And that was the goal, and that was the mission from the start, to create our own 8-hour course that's very intense, very critical thinking, critical decisions, and the situation is evolving and growing, and to really test our personnel, our command staff. So we have that course. It's approved. The issue that we had with rolling it out is we didn't have the staffing for it. Emergency Service Division was short-staffed due to budget issues. We had to move people around. So that was one of the recommendations in the after-action report, and the mayor's office had approved the budgeting for that, which will start in July of next year. We asked for 1 supervisor and 5 additional officers to staff Emergency Services Division in order to put on this training continuously, not only for command staff, for our personnel. So we're happy to say that that was approved, and that training will start rolling out once those authorities are moved into Emergency Services Division and we can fill those positions. And we're actively working on that now with the assistance of Chief Choi and our personnel division, of being able to work with the mayor's office to get the funding over, get the positions advertised, and select the people to join that group in that training. That also leads me into the Hydra Suite. We talked about the Hydra Suite, which was a training that we did put on here at LAPD internally quite some time ago. It's been stopped for a few years now, but that is similar to a TEACS training, where it's tabletop and the situation grows. You're looking at monitors, you're listening to audio, the situation is expanded, and you're working together as a team to address that situation. We asked for funding in the after action report in the budget request of the mayor's office and the city to revamp the equipment and the software, and also to get the personnel, and that was connected to Emergency Services Division. Obviously that was approved with the 1 and 5, 1 supervisor and 5 officers. So we're able to now revamp that curriculum, use the personnel we're going to get, and have that Hydra Suite training back online. That will be not only in-service training for all personnel, especially supervisors, but also command development. So when you have lieutenants who have taken the captain's test, who are waiting to make captain, and we know we can project out when they're going to be making captain, they go to our command development school. That will be implemented in command development, and they'll be receiving that Hydra training. Also, command staff in the in-service part will be receiving that Hydra training also. With our Department Operations Center, the staff at the DOC had created tabletop exercises similar to what I'm talking about with Hydra and TEACS. And that is provided to command staff or members of the IMTs, the incident management teams, particularly prior to major events. For example, as we got closer to the Super Bowl and we got closer to Summit of Americas, the DOC, the Department Operations Center, took those individuals who were identified as part of the incident management teams, brought them in for these tabletop exercises, and ran through scenarios. So they're kind of a refresher to make sure we're ready to go for that incident that's coming up. Currently out of command staff, 53 or 46% of command staff have attended some type of tabletop training put on by the DOC. In addition, our law enforcement executive development series, that's our leads training, that's headed by Dr. Pinnell and PTE. That's scheduled for this fall. All command staff will attend leads training. There's usually a 2-day training session, and we are going to incorporate parts of that 8-hour course I spoke about earlier into that course, where again, the command staff are getting the TEACS, ICS, IMT scenario-based training, again, from our Emergency Services Division personnel. So overall, that's kind of a summary of the training that we have ongoing, the training that will be coming up with the after action, the report recommendations, especially with the funding now being approved, that we can move forward with our own 8-hour course. We can continue to put command staff through the TEACS training, and we can start the Hydra Suite and the Hydra training for command staff.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Reyna. I have a couple of questions, because I'm concerned about the level of command staff that's actually attending the training. I mean, below 50% is not a number that is something that I think is good for the department, or is something that can be justified. Can you explain to me whether or not the command staff is required to attend this training?
Which training is that, sir, specifically?
Well, you start off on your written report to us, the mobile field force. And you indicate continued command and control training for the employees. There, only 48% of the command staff attended that, correct?
Correct.
I mean, that was required training for command staff personnel, as I understand it. Is that not true?
It was required, and the command and control aspect of the mobile field force training after the civil unrest in 2020 really became robust, and all department personnel were mandated to go through that training. The command and control training had been ongoing previous to the civil unrest in 2020, and it was, in a sense, refreshed in 2020 to get more command staff members through. Yeah, the numbers are low. It is required to go through there. We do try to work with the command staff schedules to get them into this training so they can move away from their office, in a sense, move away from their obligations for a full day to go through that training. That command and control training, like I said, has stopped in July of 2021. However, the new 8-hour critical thinking and force options training has just started, and they will be mandated to go through that, where they'll get that command and control training from our staff. So as we're moving forward and we've just implemented that new course, they will be required to go through. So we're hoping we can increase those numbers dramatically.
Question, Chief Reyna, just if I could, just for a moment. This training stopped in July of 2021, correct?
The command and control did, yes.
Is your population, we've promoted more than 30 captains since that time. So is that part of the population?
Yeah, we looked at that in all these numbers. We looked at the current command staff, especially the lieutenants who just made captain, to see what type of training they had received as a lieutenant and incorporated it into the numbers as a command staff member. Yes, sir.
So Commissioner Briggs, the point is that the lieutenants previously may or may not have been involved in this training. They've all promoted to captain in the less than the last year. And there hasn't been, in other words, there
hasn't been a renewal of it.
Yeah, hasn't that, because it's shifted to a new type of training that covers the command and control aspect of it. And I do expect, and I will say that we had a couple of sessions, I remember year and a half ago, in which we had to provide particular emphasis to get command officers at the training, because particular to that training was boots on the ground, actually sitting as an incident commander, working through the field exercises. So to your point of expecting our personnel across the organization, command and control, given the particular performance in 2020, where the weakness was not so much on the officers' actions, I believe the weaknesses was in the command and control at the more senior levels. So it is our expectation that our personnel step into this. That's where the TEACS training, the tabletops that have been going on in preparation for Summit Americas, as well as the Super Bowl, we've seen a marked improvement.
Right, Chief, and I was going to comment on that. I was going to say that, the Summit of Americas was a good example of that tabletop training and how the department acquitted itself really well, having had that training. So, I mean, if we have some members of the command staff that aren't attending what can be viewed as necessary training, then I think that needs to be corrected. Chief Reyna, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, I was going to add that in command development, like I spoke about, lieutenants who will be making captain or captains that just made it and they go back for command development, they also receive ICS ESD training there. It's mandatory in that course curriculum. So they are getting mandated training in command development before they make captain to understand the ICS system, the IMT system, and how that all works. And that is put on by our emergency service division personnel that I spoke about.
And you used a term there, Chief, and for everyone who doesn't speak police jargon, what is Hydra?
Okay, so Hydra is, if I go back for the Greek mythology, the Hydra of the snakes and things are constantly moving and evolving, and it's.
Let me take a second.
If you can save me that one, Chief. So.
This is there is a British professor that brought them Hydra model to the department more than a decade ago. It refers to a mythical animal that when you cut off his head, 2 more heads are created. So it speaks about the evolving challenge of a problem and the complexity of the challenge, and how decisions can compound a problem into making it worse. And how do you try to stay ahead of the problem through how do you fight a hydra? How do you fight something that continues to evolve and continues to get more and more complex and challenging? In this model, which the department engaged in beginning in 2000, I want to say 5, 6, or 7, we put 5 centers of decision-making tabletops, and we present a challenge to them that is a combination of, it's a multimedia presentation, both a formal presentation of here's the problem, here's the situation, with some video vignettes, and then we give the problem to the tables, and we have and this is all recorded, and then they work through their problems, and they come back, and then the next vignette complicates it differently. And depending on the decisions they make, the hydro operator can make the problem get worse or make the problem get better. And at the end of all this, the 5 teams are brought together and you debrief it. And you see group dynamics at play. You see dominant figures that can have an undue influence on a direction that a solution is taken. You see a lack of resources or awareness of alternative resources that might be available, so that a unified command, we stress the importance of a unified command, of using all the hands that are at the table in order to come to a solution. The outcome of this work was we pulled away from it because of staffing concerns and staffing shortage, as well as the capabilities of the Hydra unit. It takes software and equipment. And what we saw in the after action report was, because of a portion of the lack of decision-making abilities, the lack of recognizing the working as a team, and the dealing with the types of complexities, that it would benefit by us going back to the Hydra model. So this current budget fiscal year that's just been approved reinstated staffing for that function. When people ask, well, how did you walk away from such a powerful tool? When we reduced 650 personnel, there were functions that had to be eliminated in order to meet the basic patrol requirements. I'm grateful for this commission leadership, the mayor's support, and the council's approval of us reinstating this as a training tool to develop our personnel.
When will it be implemented, Chief? When will the command staff be required to go through this?
So, like I said, the funding starts in the new fiscal year. We have to work with our personnel division to be able to retrieve that money, put the authorities out, advertise for those positions, so personnel can put in for it and interview and go through the process to apply for the positions and the selections. We're hoping, now that we know we have the money, we're hoping we can get this up and running in probably the next 6 to 8 weeks. We are working with the vendor in order to make sure the software is updated, like the chief alluded to, and the equipment. But we think we can turn that around hopefully within a month or so, once we get the positions advertised and filled, and we can get going. But maybe a little longer, depending how fast we can do that. So
frame that with a little more realistic. It'll take us. I'm not sure, Mark, if this was funded for the full year or 6 months of funding. I need to check on that, because some of our training requests were not funded for the full budgetary year. But standing this unit up, if we're approved to go July 1st, will take us at a minimum 90 days. Just the advertisement selection, bringing people in. But this is one of the tools that we're grateful that was supported. And I do look forward to us implementing it. But I want to just pump the brakes here as far as how soon you're actually going to be having training classes actually utilizing this software. Don't like to disagree my training with the guy running my training side, but I also don't want to establish a benchmark that I have some question about us achieving in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Bonner, did you have any questions?
Yes, just a couple. Thank you. I'm just trying to also just get a little further perspective on this. First question, just in terms of context, other than the continuous ICS training, all of the other training that's discussed here is related to, I know since it's part of the after action review, that means it's related to these unusual occurrence situations. Is that correct?
This training is related to, yes, unusual occurrence, major events, things like that.
Right. Okay. And then this is, I think, some of the ground that Commissioner Briggs is just covering, but what should we make of 40, 46% or so of what I perceive as a relatively manageable 115 members of the command staff? Are you feeling good about that number? Are you disappointed in the number, or just what would you encourage us to think about?
I think there's room to improve. I think those percentages of having half of command staff having gone through whatever the specific training, some is 48%, some is a little higher, but I think there's obviously room to improve to get more command staff in there, and working with the directors of those offices and working with the deputy chiefs to make sure that these command staffs can be relieved of their duties and attend this training without being interrupted, without having other mandates, other things that we all know that command staff members, LAPD, are very busy, but we have to make it a priority and work around the schedules to make sure we get them in there and get them trained.
And where does the buck stop on that? In terms of, my assumption, and especially in a chain of command situation, somebody gives an order or directive to do something, and you would expect that people, particularly in a chain and the command staff, would do it. So where does the buck stop on that?
I think, like you said, in the chain of command, depending on what level the command staff member is not attending, going above that. But if it appears to be an overall issue in the department, then obviously we'll reach out to the chief of staff and the chief of police to make sure it's addressed and be guided by the chief's direction and decision on how that will happen.
Well, I think we'll appreciate some further and continuing comment on that going forward, because it's still, at least to me, a little bit unclear as to what the overall level of commitment and priority is. The third question is about the sense of timing as related in terms of when this would be complete. I understand, like the Hydra training, for example, and I think it was when John Peters was over OSO in 18, I think is when the group was eliminated or shrunk down, and then now it's rebuilding it. But that, I believe, or I understand, requires a fairly lengthy lead time to send people to London to be trained and all those kind of things. So the timetable that was mentioned here, I don't know if it was only specific to Hydra training, but a matter of months, seemed to me to maybe be a little optimistic. So what am I missing there in terms of how much time it'll really take to rebuild that capability and execute the training?
Well, I think, it depends on which training we're talking about. So if you're talking about Hydra, like the chief said, looking at, let's say, 3 months out by the time we select, but a lot of the individuals within ESD and our adjunct instructors are familiar with the software and with how it all works. It's just a matter of upgrading software and curriculum and getting the team together and pushing forward. For example, when it comes to TEACS training, if we're looking at 44% of the personnel have gone to TEACS training, and we're allowed 3 to maybe sometimes 4 spots a month. If we do the math, and it's going to take obviously a few months up to a year to get everyone through that TEACS training. So it really comes down to overall, and just starting the new course in the critical thinking and force options. Even if we put a couple, 2-3 command staff in each course that's going, we're trying to do it twice a month right now at minimum. It's going to take a few months to do that. So each course has its own timeline, but I would guess overall it's going to take a few months, if not up to a year or so, to get everyone through all this training.
Well, it seems to me, and I, again, still may be missing something, but it seems to me that particularly with the number of people that we're talking about, this is not trying to do, all of the sworn, officers in the department. It's a relatively finite group of people and training. And so I think at some point in time, you could come back with a little tighter comment really on the level of progress and not just the comment, but the commitment also as to when this could be completed.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Briggs.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Commissioner Decker.
Yes, thank you. Chief Reina, just a few follow-up questions to what my colleagues have been asking. With respect to for the ICS training, and I asked this question because there was a point in time when I had taken some of that training as well, and can tell you that it's definitely a perishable skill. How recent is the information that you have that folks took that training? Is it within the last 2 years, last 5 years? Is it ever, or what is the time frame that they completed it?
Which training was that? It broke up right when you said the ICS. Which one are we referring to, Commissioner?
The ICS training.
The ICS 300 and 400?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's for example, I went through that as a lieutenant and a new captain. So it's quite some time since I've been through ICS 300 and 400. That's not a mandatory training that is consistent. You have to cycle through like other trainings each year, every 2 years. So once you're certified in the training, then you're certified.
Right. So the answer to my question is the data you have is whether folks ever took the training. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Is the same true with the command and control training?
With the command and control, because like I said, prior to the civil unrest, the command and control had been taught through in-service. So when you're looking at, and we can go into our databases and we can run that course to see with the names of command staff. So some recently, as of the time, it was up to July of 2021, but some much prior to that, a year, 2 years, 3 years prior to that, when they received that command and control training.
And so with the new training that is coming online in the new fiscal year, will everyone be required to retake it so that their skills are consistent with the new training?
Yeah, so when it comes to the new critical thinking force options course that has the command and control component in it, all command staff, all personnel, sworn personnel will be required to attend that training.
And so it will also, the training just starts over for everyone.
Correct.
And so the numbers we have today, they're really somewhat obsolete because it reflects what has happened in the past. And it could have been training they had prior to 2020 when the unrest happened and the after action reports came out saying more training was needed, right?
That's correct.
Okay. I think I understand the report now. Thank you.
Is that all, Commissioner Decker?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Briggs.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Soboroff, did you have any questions? Chief Reyna, thank you very much for your report. I move that we approve the department's report with the request that within 90 days, Chief Reyna report back to the commission as to progress in its implementation. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Thank you, Chief Reyna.
Thank you.
Good job.
At this time, that concludes our regular agenda item sessions. We're going to be going into closed session. I would say at 11:45, we'll go into closed session. Thank you very much, everyone.
Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss agenda item 5A in accordance with Government Code 54957.
We've just concluded closed session. Mr. Tiefenk, can you read back the results?
Yes, Mr. President, Commission has concluded its work in closed session. As it relates to item 6A1, officer involved shooting an animal, 036-21. The commission adopted the chief's recommendations unanimously on a 4-0 vote. Those recommendations were tactics, tactical debrief, 1 police officer, 2+2, drawing and exhibiting in policy, 1 police officer, 2+2, lethal use of force in policy, 1 police officer, 2+2. Relates to item 6A2, officer involved shooting 037-21. Commission unanimously on a 4-0 vote adopted the recommendations of the chief of police, which were tactics, tactical debrief, 1 police officer, 2, and 1 police officer, 1. Drawing and exhibiting in policy, 1 police officer, 2, 1 police officer, 1. Lethal use of force in policy, 1 police officer, 2, 1 police officer, 1. That concludes the report out.
Thank you, Mr. Tiefenk. There being no further business before the Board of Police Commissioners, I move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. See you next week, everyone.
Thank
Stay
you, sir.
safe.